Well, the first full production of Theatre Projects Manitoba's new season is part lecture, part meditation, and part threat. It's called The Only Good Indian, a play on the infamous quote by John A. Macdonald, and it sees a variety of performers try and explain the unexplainable to the audience who comes to see it, and poses a simple question to them at the same time. What would you die for? Eric Plamendon is one of the writers and performers of OGI, as it is colloquially known. He joins us in the Classic 107 studios to tell us more about the show. Nice to see you, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'll start with the question, what would you... No, I'm kidding.
The simple question?
Yeah, exactly, the simple question.
Take us at least an hour to dissect and offer back. Yeah.
We've only got... Yeah, exactly. Full hour, all the philosophical questions we could possibly ask. But we alluded to this in the intro, that this is part lecture, part threat, part meditation. What exactly do the performers explain, I guess, to the audience?
It changes per night, which is the other piece of this form of hybrid theater. Like it's for sure theater, but pandemic theater, Jiv and Tom are playing with the formula a bit. So there is a element of like TED Talk-esque because there's one performer on stage for the whole duration who's been asked to slip on the suicide vest and to spend time in the mindset of someone who would do that. And I'm not going to say to get to the point where it's justified, because I don't think it's ever justified, but at least to sort of understand what would drive someone to do that. And is there elements of societal malaise that gets to where that is an option, where people view that as an option. So every night, well, not every night, but there's 3 different local performers, and then there's Jiv and Tom who do it too. So even if you go on Monday, you're going to get a very different experience than if you go Tuesday, because Tuesday Eric's performing, and on Monday maybe Hazel was performing.
Right.
And the whole... I'm a queer Indigenous Manitoban. Hazel's a second generation Filipina. Debbie's living with a degenerative condition. So all of us are approaching what are those societal factors from a very different angle. So there's a lot of us that's been given to what we're presenting.
There's a lot to unpack within all of that, Eric, but you mentioned that this is something that has been taking shape for a number of years already, that goes back all the way to pandemic, the height of the pandemic days as well.
Well, pandemic theater ironically got their name pre-COVID pandemic, but now I feel like, you're on trend now.
Yeah, exactly. Now the world's caught up with the theater. Yeah. Exactly. So then, as you are contemplating this question, what would you die for? As all the performers are strapping on the suicide vest for the first time, what are there conversations happening between performers as this is taking shape about what this is going to look like? How does this take shape, where you realize, we need all these different performers to approach this from their own unique visions?
Yeah, so the writing process has been interesting. So we both write and perform what we wrote, and Jiv and Tom sort of gave us these set lectures that will be incorporated in what each of us do. For example, we all spend time explaining where does the word Indian come from. And I think a lot of us recognize that Christopher Columbus came to Turtle Island. He thought it was India, so the people living on the land must be Indians. But we go a bit further in sort of explaining that it's actually the Persians who wanted to name the people in the valley near the Sindhu River, but in their dialect, Sindhu was Hindu. And then the Greeks came along and they did the same thing and became Indo. And then the English came along and they did the same thing and became India. So it's that whole concept of Indian has always been from non-Indigenous people trying to name the people over there.
Right.
So we're hoping that is, that what we did was supported in some way, but then Jiv and Tom asked each of us and didn't give us the answer to, well, can you say the word Indian? And so we spent time sort of grappling with what does that mean for me, and obviously me as an Indigenous person, my answer is going to be very different than a Filipina woman or a colonial or a settler woman. And even Indian, I'm like, it doesn't exist often in my vocab. And what I actually struggle with, because I'm French Métis, was am I a sauvage? Because sauvage was the word we use. And actually, we're taping this right now in Saint Vital. I grew up in Saint Vital, which is a bit, the neighborhood of the Métis people.
Yeah.
And that was the word. So I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to play off of that. And that became a whole section of the play that I wrote.
That is such an interesting thing to contemplate, like how that word is used, because you see the title, and even I felt compelled to say the OGI, like the simpler version, because like it's hard to actually bring yourself to say the word in 2025. What was that like to confront, as you were not only confronting the word Indian, quote unquote, but also sauvage as you were going along?
It was hard, and I think I can admit it now. When I was first approached by Theatre Projects Manitoba to do this, I said, no way. Like, there's no way I'm going to represent an quote unquote Indian or an Indigenous person strapping on a suicide vest. Like, you're crazy. But they were very supportive, and they're like, well, go through the process, and if you get to somewhere that you feel comfortable performing, then you'll perform it. And if you don't, that's okay too. And so that permission of being uncomfortable and knowing that there wasn't an obligation to, but what happens through the exercise was what was important, what mattered in this, made me sort of realize, I'm like, oh, that's the contemplative part that they were talking about. Yeah. And that's also what the audience will be going through. Like, I'm not expecting the audience to be comfortable saying Indian after seeing OGI. Like, that is not the goal. But there's that self-awareness, and even like testing, does everyone know what the end of that proverb of the only good Indian is? Yeah,
right.
And it's been interesting, and like even bringing ourselves to say the end of that proverb is a dead Indian.
Yeah.
And being honest about that part of, for a long time, and maybe still in certain minds, that was the message. I think we're in that era that we're okay with letting that truth sort of surface, but we don't have to carry it. I think that's the magic of theater. You can walk into the theater, spend time in that, but you don't have to carry it out with you. But you carry out sort of that, how do I feel about it? What do I approach about it? How do I feel like an Indian in that sense as another? Because I think we are a society of people who feel like others. And how do we get past that? And how do we get back to sort of being a collective that can be with one another and not think that death is the choice to provoke the changes that we seek?
I would imagine that part of the way to get that equation righted is to be able to take an approach like what Theatre Projects Manitoba has done, to say here, I want you, Eric, to take this on. But if you don't, like, if you come to a place where you're not comfortable, that's okay. That's such a rarity in my mind as I think about the economization and the monetization of the theater industry, the arts industry writ large. What was it like to have that kind of support from Theatre Projects Manitoba as you were creating your particular version of OGI, and how do you think the audience will see that process compared to something that is a bit more of a traditional, we need to put butts in seats to make money on this production?
Yeah. It is rare and nice, and it feels supported. And there was a lot of touch bases along the way too, of like, how you feeling with this, which is also a form of like, where you at? Are you writing? And it's like, yes, I'm writing. Right. But it changed what I put in and how I structured it and what I understood my relationship with the audience was, especially like when you think of a one-person show, you're like, oh, you're alone on stage. But because it also has that TED Talky sort of feel to it, I'm like, oh no, like everyone in the room is part of the performance. I'm hoping the audience doesn't think that they have lines that they say out loud.
Right.
But they have a role to play, and their energy and their reaction is part of it. It actually meant, and this is a slight spoiler, but those who choose to come see my show, I hope it doesn't ruin everything. But in that permission of, I didn't need to perform if I didn't feel comfortable. At the top of the show, I do the same with the audience, is if you don't want to stay here, you can leave.
Yeah.
There's 2 exit signs behind me that
That's
remind
huge.
you don't have to stay. Now, we'll see.
Yeah, right.
We'll see what people do out of that. And it is that sort of reminder of, it is a play that's asking people to sit in uncomfortable places.
Yeah.
There are moments that are lighter and are humorous, I hope. But yeah, that's what we're asking people. And if you're not there, that's okay. But the second part of, I think, the uniqueness of this play, and it shows that Pandemic and Theatre Projects Manitoba have care, is that after the play, instead of doing a normal talk back, we're doing a bit of a long table exchange. So all those who feel like something's been shaken up in them or provoked in them, they're invited to come sit at the table, and we're just going to share with each other the impressions. So that level of care of, like, if you're going to do that kind of provocateur sort of theater, feels right, and feels that I can trust to place myself in your hands. So I hope that the structure feels inviting to people.